You ever get the feeling that your life is perfect only because someone else is pulling strings behind the curtain? That was me, before everything fell apart. My name is Michael Hayes, and for years I thought I was the luckiest man alive. A beautiful wife, 2 kids who adored me, and a thriving business that kept us comfortable. We had the house in the suburbs, the vacations, the social circle where everyone smiled and said, "You two are perfect together." But perfection has a way of hiding rot. And once I caught the first whiff of it, I couldn't unsmell it. It started small, the kind of things you tell yourself not to overthink. Laura, my wife, had always been attentive, affectionate, the glue of our family. But then came the late-night texts, the sudden excuses, the dinners she forgot to tell me about. She started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. I tried to brush it off. We'd been married 13 years, people change. But one night, as I came home late from a client meeting, I noticed something that clawed into my gut and never let go. Her car was in the driveway, lights on inside the house. But when I stepped in, she wasn't alone. Through the crack of the kitchen door, I saw her laughing, really laughing, the way she used to with me. And across the table sat my brother, Daniel. My first instinct was relief. Family dropping by wasn't unusual. But something in the way they leaned close, the way his hand brushed hers casually, like it had done so many times before, it didn't feel right. I froze there in the hallway, invisible, listening to their low voices blend into something intimate. It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. Comfortable. Familiar. Like this wasn't the first time. I forced myself to walk in, pretending nothing was wrong. They jumped a little, exchanged a glance too quick for me to miss. Laura kissed my cheek, Daniel clapped me on the back, and we went through the motions of family chatter. But my stomach churned with every word. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spiraling. Was it paranoia? A trick of the light? Or had I just glimpsed the ugliest truth a man could face, that his wife and his own brother had crossed a line? I didn't sleep. And by morning, the decision was made. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. If there was betrayal, I needed proof. Hard evidence. Something they couldn't twist, couldn't deny. So I began watching. Listening. Quietly collecting the fragments of a puzzle I prayed I'd never complete. What I didn't realize then was that I was already standing on the edge of a cliff, and once I jumped, there'd be no going back. Once suspicion plants itself in your mind, it grows like a weed. You can try to pull it out, water the soil with trust, but it always leaves roots. By the time I saw Laura and Daniel laughing in my kitchen, I knew the roots had already spread too deep. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That it was my stress from work, or maybe jealousy. But then the small details piled up, and denial wasn't enough to shield me anymore. Laura had always been open with me, her phone left on the counter, her schedule shared casually. Now, her phone was either in her hand or face down, locked tight. She started staying late at book club, but her clothes would smell faintly of cologne when she returned. Her excuses felt rehearsed, too smooth. And then there was Daniel. My brother. He started showing up more often, stopping by for no reason, helping with little chores I never asked for. Once, I found his jacket hanging in our closet. He laughed it off, said Laura must have put it there by mistake. But the unease that lodged itself in my chest told me otherwise. I needed clarity. One Saturday morning, Laura told me she was running errands. The kids were at a sleepover, so the house was quiet. Minutes after she left, I followed, keeping a distance, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. She didn't go to the store. She didn't go anywhere near her usual routes. Instead, she pulled into a cafe on the other side of town. My heart dropped as I watched Daniel slide into the booth across from her. They sat close, too close. He brushed her hair back when she leaned forward, and she laughed that same laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. They weren't kissing, not in public, but the intimacy was clear. I snapped a photo with my phone, my hands shaking so hard the image blurred. Proof. Not enough to end everything, but enough to confirm my worst fears. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. 1,000 thoughts swarmed my mind: anger, humiliation, confusion. Why him? Why my own brother? That night, I didn't say a word. Laura came home, kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, and I forced myself to play along. If she sensed my suspicion, she didn't show it. But inside, something hardened. I couldn't confront them yet. I needed more. If I came at them with half-formed accusations, they'd deny it, twist it, make me look paranoid. Daniel was slick, and Laura had become just as slippery. So I started digging deeper. Bank statements. Credit card bills. I scrolled through charges I didn't recognize, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel stays that didn't match my calendar. When I asked Laura about a charge once, she shrugged it off as a work expense Daniel must have paid with our card accidentally. The casualness of her lie chilled me more than the lie itself. Nights turned into rituals of investigation. When she fell asleep, I'd slip out of bed, open my laptop, and comb through every record I could access. I wasn't just a husband anymore, I was a detective, piecing together the story my wife and my brother thought they could hide. And every new detail, every unexplained charge, every text she quickly deleted, was another knife twisting in my chest. I started keeping a folder. Just like in business, documentation mattered. Dates, times, places, photos, receipts. I built my case quietly, brick by brick, while pretending nothing was wrong. The hardest part was the kids. Emma and Ryan were too young to understand. They still saw their mother as the gentle, loving woman who packed their lunches and read bedtime stories. They still saw their uncle as the fun, goofy guy who tossed them in the air and bought them candy. I couldn't take that from them, not yet. So I smiled at family dinners. I nodded at Daniel's jokes. I kissed Laura goodnight. All while the truth grew louder in my head, screaming at me that my life wasn't what it seemed. But one night, the truth screamed so loudly, I could no longer ignore it. I walked into the garage to grab a tool, and there, tucked under the passenger seat of Laura's car, was a folded receipt. A hotel just outside the city. A room for two. Paid in cash. My hands trembled as I held it, the date circled in my mind like a brand. There it was. Proof I could no longer deny. They were betraying me. Together. And suddenly, the man I had always been, the trusting husband, the proud brother, was gone. In his place stood someone else. Someone who wasn't going to wait quietly in the shadows anymore. Once I found that hotel receipt, there was no going back. It wasn't a suspicion anymore, or a shadow I could excuse. It was real. Laura and Daniel were betraying me, and they thought I was too blind, or too naive, to notice. The rage that burned in me could have boiled over right then. I could have stormed into the house, shoved the receipt in Laura's face, demanded answers. But that would have been a mistake. Because I knew them both too well. They'd deny it. They'd twist the truth, gaslight me until I started questioning my own memory. Daniel especially, he was always quick on his feet, always ready with a smile or an excuse. So instead, I did something harder. I pretended. At home, I acted like nothing had changed. I laughed at dinner, watched movies with the kids, kissed Laura goodnight. I even joked with Daniel when he stopped by uninvited. On the surface, I was the same husband, the same brother. But beneath that mask, I was sharper, colder, calculating every move. The receipt went into a folder I kept hidden in my office. It wasn't just a folder anymore, it was a case file. Inside were photographs, screenshots of bank statements, copies of charges I couldn't explain. I even started writing down conversations, noting the exact times Laura claimed to be working late or Daniel said he was busy with clients. Every lie was logged, every inconsistency documented. Patience became my weapon. Meanwhile, I strengthened my defenses. I opened a bank account in my name only and quietly moved some savings there. I changed passwords to joint accounts, locked down the kids' education funds, and met with a lawyer under the guise of a business consultation. She told me exactly what to do: gather proof, protect the kids, and wait for the right moment. So that's what I did. But waiting came with its own torture. Every time Laura's phone buzzed, I had to swallow the urge to snatch it from her hands. Every time Daniel dropped by, my fists clenched under the table, itching to knock the smugness off his face. I lived with the constant thrum of betrayal under my skin, and yet I smiled. I smiled so convincingly, I think even Laura believed I was still in the dark. One night, I watched her from across the bedroom. She was scrolling her phone, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Probably him. My own brother. She caught me looking and tilted her head. "What?" she asked lightly. "Nothing," I said, forcing a grin. "Just thinking how lucky I am." The irony nearly choked me. What she didn't know was that while she was busy falling deeper into her affair, I was building the very thing that would destroy them both. The investigator I hired brought me more than I expected. Photos of Laura and Daniel together at restaurants miles away from home. Records of hotel check-ins. Time-stamped evidence that lined up perfectly with the excuses I'd written down in my notes. Each report was another brick in the wall I was building around them, a wall they'd never climb over. And Daniel, my brother, my own blood, was arrogant enough to believe he was untouchable. He still showed up for family dinners, still cracked jokes with the kids, still acted like he was doing me a favor by being around. Watching him sit at my table, eating my food, laughing with my children, it was almost unbearable. But I let him. I needed him to believe he was winning. Because when people think they're safe, they get sloppy. And sloppy people leave evidence. The breaking point came one afternoon when Laura said she was going to meet a friend for coffee. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and watched her leave. Minutes later, I followed at a distance. Sure enough, she met Daniel at the very cafe I had already seen them in once before. This time, they weren't careful. They sat side by side, his hand on her thigh, her head leaning on his shoulder. I snapped photos from the street, my heart hammering but my hands steady. Proof. More proof. Proof that no lawyer, no family member, no judge could ignore. That night, when Laura came home, I didn't say a word. I tucked the kids into bed, cleaned the kitchen, and kissed her goodnight. But as she drifted off to sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the plan fully formed in my mind. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to strip away everything they thought they had taken from me. They wanted to laugh behind my back. Fine. Soon, they'd choke on their own lies. By the time winter set in, the mask I wore had become second nature. I could look Laura in the eye and smile while knowing exactly where she had been the night before. I could laugh at Daniel's jokes even though every word from his mouth made my blood boil. On the surface, I was calm. Inside, I was sharpening knives. The folder in my office had grown thick, heavy. Pages of receipts, photographs, investigator reports. A damning record of betrayal. I had backed up everything onto a flash drive, hidden another copy at my lawyer's office, and kept a third in a safe deposit box. There was no way they could talk their way out of this. I was patient. I waited for the right moment, not just for me, but for impact. And that moment arrived sooner than I expected. It was Ryan's birthday. A small family gathering, just cake and presents in the living room. Laura bustled around with balloons, and Daniel showed up with his trademark grin, a wrapped gift in hand. Watching him hug my son, hearing my boy call him Uncle Dan, nearly made me lose it. But I held my composure. After the kids went to bed, Laura poured glasses of wine for the three of us. Daniel leaned back on the couch like he owned the place, Laura sitting just a little too close. I watched them for a moment, memorizing the smug comfort between them, before I stood and walked to my office. When I returned, I carried the folder. Without a word, I dropped it on the coffee table. Papers spilled across the wood, receipts, photos, reports. Proof. The air changed instantly. Laura's face drained of color. Daniel's smirk faltered. "What's this?" Daniel tried to sound casual, but his voice cracked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I watched as their eyes darted over the photos, Laura and Daniel together at the cafe, at the hotel, in the parking lot of a restaurant across town. Receipts for dinners paid in cash, hotel rooms booked under fake names. Evidence layered on top of evidence. Laura stammered, her hands shaking. "Michael, I can explain." I cut her off with a look. For the first time in months, I let the mask slip. The fury, the betrayal, the disgust, all of it poured into my eyes as I stared at her. "Don't," I said quietly. My voice was steady, almost calm, but it carried more weight than a scream ever could. Daniel sat frozen, his usual charm nowhere to be found. The man who had always thought he was the clever one now looked like a boy caught stealing candy. I leaned forward, my voice low. "Every lie you told, every dollar you stole, every night you thought I didn't know, I documented all of it. This isn't suspicion. This is proof." Silence fell heavy in the room. Laura's lip quivered. Daniel opened his mouth but closed it again, his confidence stripped bare. I stood, towering over them, and said the words I had rehearsed 1,000 times. "You've already lost. You just don't know how much yet." Then I walked away, leaving them drowning in the evidence of their own betrayal. The fallout came quickly. Laura begged. She cried, tried to convince me it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. Daniel called me, left voicemails ranging from apologetic to defensive to outright angry. But none of it mattered. Their voices were just noise against the clarity of my decision. My lawyer filed the divorce papers the next morning. Full custody of the kids, the house, financial support, all backed by the mountain of evidence I had collected. Laura had no ground to stand on. And Daniel, my brother, would have to face the family when the truth inevitably came out. At night, I would lie awake, not with doubt but with resolve. The confrontation had changed everything. I wasn't just surviving their betrayal anymore. I was dismantling it piece by piece. And soon, neither of them would have anything left to hide behind. The weeks after the confrontation moved like a storm, loud, relentless, impossible to ignore. Once the folder hit that coffee table, there was no stuffing the truth back into shadows. Laura spiraled. She cried, pleaded, promised it had meant nothing. She left desperate notes on my pillow, tried to catch me in the kitchen with shaking hands reaching for mine. But I had nothing left to give her. Every word out of her mouth felt like poison. She had chosen lies over loyalty, and now she was choking on the consequences. Daniel wasn't much better. He called non-stop, his voice swinging between apologetic and aggressive. One message would be him begging me to meet, to talk, as brothers. The next, he'd rage, accusing me of tearing apart the family. I didn't respond. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. Meanwhile, my lawyer moved quickly. The evidence I'd collected was devastating: photographs, receipts, investigator reports. There was no way to spin it. In court, Laura's lawyer tried to soften the picture, but the judge saw through it. The hotel stays, the unexplained expenses, the betrayal with my own brother, it painted a story too clear to ignore. The ruling came down hard. I kept the house. I won full custody of Emma and Ryan. Laura walked away with little more than the clothes she packed in boxes. Daniel, exposed for what he was, became a pariah in the family. The same relatives who once praised him now looked at him with disgust. The day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse into bright spring sunlight. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt air fill my lungs without the weight of lies pressing against them. I picked up Emma and Ryan from school, and when they climbed into the car, their laughter filled the space. They didn't fully understand what had happened, thank God, but they knew enough to feel safe with me. That was all I cared about. At home that night, we ate pizza on the living room floor and watched a movie. The kids dozed off halfway through, their heads resting on my shoulders. I looked down at them, and a thought settled deep into my chest: we were going to be okay. Better than okay. Later, after tucking them into bed, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand. The quiet was different now. Not tense, not heavy. Peaceful. I thought about Laura and Daniel, two people who had mistaken my silence for weakness, who had laughed in shadows thinking I'd never see. They thought betrayal would break me. But instead, it forged me into something stronger. The truth is, betrayal doesn't just end relationships. It reshapes people. It burns away illusions until all that's left is who you really are. And who I was now, was a man free from lies. Daniel lost a brother. Laura lost a husband. But me? I gained something far greater. My freedom. My children's future. And the unshakable knowledge that I'd never again allow anyone to mistake my patience for blindness. I took a long breath of the cool night air, the stars sharp against the sky. It was over. And I was finally free.